Hey, welcome to What the Flip podcast. I'm your host, Victor Vogel. Um, Today, I'm actually talking about a topic I normally talk about on my other Facebook page, Creating a Bad Guy Free Zone, which is focused more on protection, personal protection, and those kinds of things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, And the topic I've chosen today is violent mistakes. And what I hope you walk away with today is understanding that there are a couple of things. One, there's more violence in America than any time in my lifetime, and I'm 74 years old, uh, within the country. And the fact that uh, the other fact I hope to present, and I hope you learn and accept, is the idea that when it comes to your safety and your security and your protection, that you are the one who ends up being accountable for that. You can't rest or rely on anybody else to do that for you. So that's part of what I want to do today is cover those topic areas in this discussion. So I'll go ahead and click over here and put up any comments that people might be posting here in this section. So as people put in comments, they'll really show up here at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully, be nice, be respectful of the broadcast, but feel comfortable to put in a comment. So let's begin with the idea that more violence is happening in America than like I said, any time in my lifetime, and that's 74 years. So I would assume a lot of other Americans also. Uh, and that's happening because of the divisiveness in the country, um, because of the leadership, and I'm not just talking about Trump. I'm talking about leadership in general of our nation's leaders. Although Trump has a significant part in that, something he could do to turn it around and chooses not to, but in fact inflames it. Um, but there are others. There are others besides him. So that have the way our government has operated and what they've focused on that really causes a sense of violence. Now, so why would people decide that violence is the way to solve a problem when in reality we know pretty much it doesn't? Otherwise, a war would have ended it all at one point in time, right? But that's not the case. In fact, we've had wars throughout history. We're still having wars, probably more wars than we've had in the past. They're still not solving the problems. So within the country, there are people now who are beginning to threaten other people if they don't think like they do. And we have not, at least in my generation, growing up in the 50s and 60s, we really did not have that to a violent extent. We've always had it where there's disagreement. There have always been, for example, gangs in this country, but nothing like the organized gangs that we have today that commit criminal acts. So it's important to recognize that violence is out there. And I think we're feeling that now. I think we're sensing that as we see things like organized white supremacist groups trying to kidnap governors or threaten people at polls by just simply carrying firearms. The reality is about a firearm, a gun in itself, is an inanimate, cold object and does nothing unless there's some sort of human interaction with it. And therein lies the rub. Um, the idea that um, because um, guns, for example, create a sense of fear when they're observed um, in a period of time where people are carrying a gun on their hip out in the open, can openly intimidate people. And most people are associating that to the actual gun itself. But it's not when you really think about it. What people are fearful of is what the person who is carrying that gun might do. And that is a legitimate fear. That's a legitimate fear. If you've ever attended some conceal and carry classes, I mean, I am the author of this book behind me, Creating a Bad Guy Free Zone, How the Average Person Can Protect Themselves. And I wrote that book because in taking in a lot of firearms courses, and I've taken a lot in my lifetime between the military and my civilian um, jobs that I had as a protection consultant, where I really came, people think of it as a bodyguard, but it's more than that. But I even stepped out of that realm to become more in the education side, because you could protect one or two people, or 5 or 10 or maybe 20 people on a continual basis. But we needed something to help the average person out there protect themselves during a time where school mass shootings were going on, mall mass shootings were going on, theater shootings were going on. Yeah, in fact, every place that you tend to frequent, restaurants, movies, malls, salons, you name it. If you've gone there or you tend to go there, there's been a shooting, and it's been a mass shooting where more than 4 people have been killed. So, if you think about it in that light, then it becomes paramount that people understand that they begin to develop the need to understand that protecting yourself is your responsibility and accountability, and the people who you love. It's your responsibility and accountability. And why is that? So, uh, most people, now when I first wrote this book back in 2007, I predicted this would be going on back then. You can go back and look some of the posts I've made on my YouTube channel called Reduce Threats, and other areas where I've made comments that violence was on its way. It's increasing. It's something that, I don't know, I had a bent for as a business consultant. I could look out there and see all the dots floating out there and kind of connect them and see a pattern. That's why I went into strategy consulting. But that's true with this also. It was not hard to spot the dots out there in various places. White supremacy group growing up, more guns being distributed in the country, more automatic weapons being distributed in the country, more and more concern about what was going on in our country. And you could also sense the racial divide and other things. You put all that together, it's a pretty good indicator, unless there was some sort of barrier getting in the way of that was going to increase. And not only wasn't there a barrier, with the election of Donald Trump, we got an infusion of support for that division and that violence. So that's what was going on here. That was what's going on here. And that's why you need to know that protecting yourself is important. Now, when it comes to protecting yourself, the other thing I found, because I ask a lot of people, so why do you buy a gun to protect yourself? And nearly everybody said it's because it's an equalizer. They feel like it's an equalizer. So I had a lot of fun. I interviewed well over 300 or 400 people average people, not militarily trained people who have seen combat, not law enforcement training, and certainly not white supremacists. Although I did interview a couple of them, and also some blatant criminals when I wrote this book um, who were pretty violent criminals. So I did get a chance to talk to them about why they felt like they could intimidate people with violence and things like that. But generally speaking, when I interviewed the average citizen who bought a gun, I found one, they spend virtually no time training. They may go to a conceal and carry class, which is 8 hours in a day, 4 hours sitting in a classroom answering questions that most of the time they give you the answers to while you're taking the test. And then secondly, you go out there and you shoot at a paper target for, I don't know, 12, 14 rounds. And if you come anywhere near that target, you get your conceal and carry educational permit. Then you have to go down, get fingerprinted, pass the background, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that is not part of that is a psychological profile test that I had to go through because I carried a firearm professionally. When you do that, law enforcement included, you have to go through a psychological profile. And, hopefully you're finding somebody who's a psychiatrist or a psychologist who's doing that correctly, and not just doing it to earn an extra $100. But if that's done correctly, then these people are automatically begin a screening process associated with their mental attitude about using a weapon, not their skill set at using a weapon. So what I found was people, they didn't go to the range. They didn't keep their skills tuned up on a regular basis. They had no idea what happens when you enter into a violent situation. So most people feel like if somebody breaks in their house in the middle of the night, that they're really going to rise to the occasion, take their gun from their bedstand where they have it, go out there into the living room and win a gun battle if necessary. If not, scare the person away by pointing a gun at them. When in fact, there are a lot of flaws with that philosophy. And I used to do a webinar with a video program. I don't do that anymore, but I used to do a webinar with a video program where I had people confronted with certain situations, like they woke up in the night. What do you do? So the video has you, and it's like you are moving, and the video tracks what you're seeing. And then when you confront somebody, what do you do? And generally speaking, people failed those video firearms testing miserably. The average person, okay, not law enforcement, not military combat trained people. The average person, sometimes they even forgot they had a gun in their hand, a laser gun in their hand, right next to their leg that they should raise and point at this person. At other times, they did raise it, and where those rounds went, because on the screen, when you fire your round, it pinpoints the round where it goes, so you can see where the round goes. Most of the time, they miss the target totally, and a lot of times they hit the wall. And sometimes that wall was the bedroom of the children on the other side of the room. And those bullets don't stop in drywall. They go through it, as the Breonna Taylor situation denotes. If you watched anything on Breonna Taylor's law enforcement's reaction to that, the people being charged in that by that district attorney, right or wrong, I mean, maybe you have versions about what you think ought to happen, but the definite ones that were charged or looked at were the ones that recklessly did not take the time to think what was behind where they were shooting and actually shot into an innocent person's bedroom. That's happened a lot of times. People have been innocently hit by fire that missed the target. And that happens simply because things happen to you in a violent situation. So, what's going on here is this: you think you're going to rise to the occasion, but you don't. When it happens, you're normally not in a mental or physical state to rise to the occasion. You're only going to rise to the level of your abilities based on your training. It's just that simple. And I've seen it time and time and time again. Um, I saw it in a live incident where I had to get behind my car during a liquor store robbery on this, across the street in a grocery store. And the owner came out firing recklessly uh, at the perpetrators who was in his store as they were leaving, as they were driving away. He was firing at them. And two of those rounds went into the grocery store next to me and to the wall next to me. Thank God they went into the wall, not through the window where people were in. Uh, the police told this person to drop their firearm, but they were so engaged in what they were doing, and this is what happens to you physically and mentally, that he didn't hear the law officers, and they didn't have time to judge exactly what was going on in the situation, so they had to shoot this man, and he was actually charged himself with reckless firearm. Uh, Now all of that resolved itself, so he didn't lose his business, didn't lose his license and things because they understand what goes on. So that's part of what happens here. You don't understand mentally and physically how you're going to react if you've never been in that situation before. And even people who have, like law enforcement, their target accuracy, they may shoot 94% on the range. They're most likely going to be down into 30 to 15 percentile accuracy during a hostile situation. About 30% if they're not being fired upon during that time, but they're still in a violent situation, and about 15% or less of accuracy hits if they're being actually fired upon back upon by the subject. So this is what happens. If you have a firearm, and you think you're going to use that firearm as an equalizer, it doesn't necessarily become an equalizer because you are the equalizer, not the firearm. The less amount of training you have, the more likelihood you're going to screw it up. You're going to hurt somebody, you're going to get shot yourself, or you're actually going to shoot somebody who is fleeing, which could end up putting you in jail for manslaughter. So, or even second degree murder, depending on how grievous the shot was in the back. Like if you shoot them while they're in the house, while they're running out the door, but you have video cameras showing that they're running, they're not a threat to you, that's one thing. If you shoot them on the edge of your lawn when they go into the street, that's another situation. So people don't understand these dynamics. They're told them in some of these conceal and carry, but they're not emphasized. They're not put through the process of having to go through the mental decision processes. So this is important for you to understand. And I'm not going to go into great depth about this because I have whole webinars and other things. And if you're interested, you can email me go to my Facebook page and message me or email me, and I'll be glad to respond back to you on why you need to look at this more in depth. But it brings up the point that if you're counting on law enforcement today to protect you, that's not a good philosophy to have. Because think about this. Nearly every shooting we've had, I've listened to people say, I never thought this would happen to me here. Well, that's your first mistake. I mean, you've seen enough of it where you should never think that ever again. It can happen to you tomorrow at any point in time. We have examples. We have white supremacist groups now. They're so mad that they actually harassed a family that was at the wrong address. The person, I guess, in Michigan who does a podcast kind of like I do, uh, I guess had some anti-violent or some anti-white supremacist, probably pretty heavily into that, which is another thing we probably shouldn't be doing out there because it just antagonizes more. But what happened was they thought, they wanted to harass this person. They got the wrong address. So there's an innocent family right there. But then they were also saying, look, we still made our point because we got publicity out of it. That's the mentality that's out there in the world today. But law enforcement didn't stop that from happening. Okay. And they didn't stop any of the mass shootings from happening in Las Vegas or the club in Orlando or other places, schools in Florida and other places. They didn't stop it because the law enforcement model is not about protection. It's about enforcement. That's why they have the phrase enforcing the law. We're law enforcement officers. Law enforcement means if after I catch you doing something, I will fine you for speeding, I will arrest you for robbing, whatever it is, but the act is done. The act is done. It's not about protecting you. Now, they have patrols, but patrols have so many times been shown not to be effective simply because they're normally scheduled criminal. All the criminals I talked to, and like I said, I talked to 2 or 3 that were really significant criminals. They all had this mapped out. They knew the routes, they knew the timing, they knew all of this stuff. They knew where the cameras were. so if you're thinking guns, cameras, police department, all these people, you can go wander around feeling comfortable that they're protecting you. They're not. They can't. There are not enough law enforcement to do that. Okay, cameras only catch things after they happen. In fact, it's pretty well known. If you have a guard dog, that's probably better than having cameras all over your house. Criminals really don't like to be bitten, and they don't like a lot of noise while they're doing things. So that's a pretty well known fact out there. So yeah, that's the thing you need to understand. That law enforcement, if you look at everything that's happening that's criminal in your community, there are some things that they might have stopped. The vast majority of them they reacted to. So you kind of think of things like guns and cameras and law enforcement and those things as security protection, and or a lot of times people go just take martial arts defense. And I have a couple of black belts, and I've had them for years, and I've taught martial arts. I taught it in service, and I taught it here. I mean, not here, but I've taught it in the civilian life for well over 30 years. And it's kind of hard to do now because it hurts. But anyway, I've done that. And I'm telling you right now, you can't go to a 4-hour course and feel comfortable you're going to stop somebody. You can't feel comfortable. Every criminal I talk to, every hardened criminal, and some of them assaulted women in cars and parking lots and carjacked them, they just assume you have a gun in your purse or that you may even have it out on the car seat. So they're going to hit you and attack you at a point in time where you're not going to be able to get to that weapon. And so just keep in mind, your criminal isn't just totally ignorant. They have a method of operation, and it's pretty consistent for most criminals, actually pretty consistent for terrorists for that matter. And there's some things you can do if you know those method of operation to protect yourself. And that brings me to the point where I'm telling you, you are accountable for your protection, and you need to take the time to learn how to protect yourself. You need to understand that protection is more proactive than reactive, like security is. So I have always had a saying that it's better to protect yourself against potential violent uh, situation than it is to react to that violent situation or defend yourself against it. Because nearly every time in a defense situation, somebody gets hurt who's trying to defend themselves. Uh, and in some cases, it doesn't end up well. A few cases it does. Those are an extremely small minority of cases. They get publicized, particularly by the NRA, but they're very small compared to the number of crimes. That's why law enforcement tells you don't fight, just give them the money, let them get out of there. You know, if they want your car, say, look, just let me get my kids out of my car. I'll leave the keys on the car seat and you can go. I won't make a fuss. Whatever it takes to get out of the situation without being harmed in a violent situation is the important thing to do. Now, of course, it'd be really nice if you were alert. Now, one thing that every one of these criminals told me also was they were very uncomfortable with people who were alert, because then the surprise is gone. Then they could pull that gun out. Then they could, not be where that criminal is, because the criminal pre-scopes everything to find out where is the best place to attack. And always keep in mind something. Whoever's deciding to commit a violent act upon you, whether it's a revengeful situation or a violent attack, and I think about Governor Whitmer when this, Governor Whitmer, had these guys not made a mistake in their planning phase, their method of operations follows what I have stated in this book up here. I mean, if you read the articles, and read this book and looked at that section on method of operation, you would find that method of operation they were pretty much following. They messed it up, and that's where most of the time they get caught, but not all of the time, and you can't count on all of the time. So you have to, if you know that, then you know what to do to create an environment where that person feels like you are not a good target for them to attack. It would be a bad target risk. Okay. And I discussed just a few of those things in the book, so you become aware of them. And it's interesting that during that period of time where they understand this, that's when they're concerned. And one of the things they were saying in Governor Whitmer's situation was the point of attack that had least barriers to them was her vacation home, because that's where everybody feels like they want to be most relaxed. Okay, so these are things that if you learn and understand about people who are committing violent acts today, you begin to create what's called a protection strategy. The same way a company creates a strategy to build its business, the same principles apply. The difference is you're applying them towards yourself and your family and your loved ones and people you know, whether it's you or your business or anything else. A protection strategy can help eliminate a lot of scenarios. Now, security is part of protection. Okay, it's a necessary element of it. It's sort of a fallback element if your protection fails for some reason. But it shouldn't be the premise of what you do to protect yourself. You should learn protection concepts and principles. And most of these I've put in the book I have here are focused on things that I've gained from friends from the FBI and who were hostage negotiators and FBI agents and retired Secret Service people I've talked to. And that's very much along the lines of what you want to think about when it comes to protection. So these are important things for you to keep in mind. This is a violent time. Be aware of everything that's going on around you. Take the actions not to get involved. It is not I would tell you right now, I'm a big proponent for equal rights, trust me, but this is not, particularly right now during this election period, this is not a good time to launch a protest. It is not a good time to launch a protest. It is not a smart thing to do. You need to pick and choose your times that minimize the violence that it can create. So, this is part of what you need to be thinking about. And, it's not a good time to go down and look at violent protests in the middle of the street in Philadelphia right now. You should stay away from those. In fact, the encouraging thing that I found with the Floyd shooting in Minnesota, I think it was, and the shooting in Philadelphia is the families. The families have said, please don't use our son's death or our daughter's death, in case of Brianna, as a means to create violence. Okay, even the families are saying, and these are people who have experienced a loss, are saying, don't do that. And it's smart. They're right. Don't do that. So there's some thoughts on violence and why you have law enforcement officers being charged with shootings, even somebody as trained as they are. They make mistakes. They make mistakes because you get tunnel vision. You have both a mental and a physical reaction to being in a life-threatening situation. And it alters your judgment, ladies and gentlemen. And you can't do anything about it. Your blood pressure's up around 200%. And that restricts your vision, gives you what's called tunnel vision. It affects your hearing, it affects your thought process, it affects everything. Unless you're physically trained over and over continuously, you're going to react to that in the right way. You will make mistakes, and there'll be violent mistakes, things that can literally cost you your life or cost you your freedom if you have to be a law enforcement officer. And we have to provide that with reconstructing our police departments. It's not to take more police away from you. It's not to take their jobs away. I think Joe Biden has this pretty much right. We don't want to take the jobs away from law. We don't want to eliminate law enforcement. What we do want to do is repurpose them and retrain them well enough for them to be able to protect you and not just to defend you or not just to react to and find the criminal and catch them and put them in jail. We want that to happen too, but we want them even more focused on making sure that we don't have a situation where that crime happens in the first place, that the protection concepts we put in place make it extremely difficult for criminals to want to do a criminal act or to do a criminal act, and to ensure that who we hire and how we treat them and how we pay them allow us to have the integrity within the department to do that and to help them, to supplement them. Don't take away from them, to supplement them so they can do that job while a social or psychologist can handle some of the other events that we're placing on these people, which is a large portion of their job. It's a bigger portion than most people understand. So this is something we want to try to make sure people understand. If we're talking about repurposing, we're not talking about getting rid of law. In my mind, we're not talking about getting rid of law enforcement. We're talking about helping them to become more protection oriented, more proactive, when they do react, that they're trained well enough to react, to recognize situations where somebody may be in a psychotic state and not fire that weapon, but clear the area. So if somebody was around a burning building that could collapse on you any minute, law enforcement and the fire department clear everybody out of that building and away from the area. They don't they and then they allow that to burn and either collapse or until they can get it under control. They don't go in there and throw people in there and let the building fall. This is the same way. I mean, we need to repurpose our thinking and our philosophies about this, not eliminate it. Eliminating it would make it a lot more dangerous for it. And by the way, I have a lot of law enforcement friends. The vast majority of them are absolutely cool and headed and good people. You know, what can turn them sour and make them feel bad about their job and about what they're doing, even though they are not going to leave it because they're dedicated, is how they're treated or what's thought about them, or the idiocy of the things we put on them that they are not trained to do, that we expect them to handle and do. It isn't going to happen until we repurpose and retrain and add to the staffing force of these people. So, just my thoughts on you kind of need to understand that you need to take accountability for your protection and your security, and don't think it can't happen to you, because it can happen to anybody, even by mistake. You can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Okay, people in Las Vegas, down in that field, listening to a country western concert, were doing nothing but enjoying themselves. They had no idea there was a maniac in the hotel above them ready to shoot them up. They had no idea. No idea. So, you know, you have to ask yourself some questions about whether, large venues are good to go to nowadays, where they are, if they're going to be held. A lot of things you can do that come in the book I have here that talks about, how to set up a protection strategy using the same thing that the Secret Service and people use, called a threat assessment. Not near as sophisticated, because you don't have their technology, you don't have their intelligence and that kind. But the basic underlying principles of threat assessment are in this book here. Okay, and the method of operation for criminals is in that book. So you can visit that Facebook page, and it's facebook.com, creating a bad guy free zone, and you'll find some good information on there right now. And if you're looking at this on the YouTube channel, it should be displaying there live on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called Threat Assessments, and in that are a lot of videos I've done on this from the time I was working on the educational phase. So there's a lot of resources out there for you, but you in the end need to take accountability and never utter the words, "This can't happen to me." Never ever. Those are the deadliest words in this country and in the world, for that matter. And a lot of these principles, by the way, threat assessments, they apply to whether you're traveling. I have a book out there also that, if you email me, and I can send you how you can get to that. I forget, I think I charge on that one. It's a PDF I send out electronically. But I like it because it's like an airline checklist, a pilot's checklist, before you go on a trip or you travel, to kind of make sure you're safe when you go. A lot of things that people don't think about when they travel, they just get an airplane and go. They pack a bunch of stuff, and some things they think about, like taking their medicine, but they forget to leave their prescriptions with some of their family. They forget to make sure to check with their doctor and give them the itinerary so the doctor would be able to write a prescription to a foreign country if they needed to. Things like that that are in that book that help you travel a little safer too. So now I went a little over 30 minutes. I apologize for that, but I hope you, in the end, I hope you are safe and stay safe. Just remember, just because someone is carrying a gun on their hip when they're standing in a voting line does not mean they're a criminal or they're a white supremacist person. Okay, that gun will do nothing until they touch it in some sort of violent act with a purposeful intent. It won't jump out of that holster and shoot you. So don't be afraid of it on their hip. If you see behavior that is antagonistic or problematic, then you might want to leave the line, but not until then. Don't let somebody standing there with a gun, even if it's an AR-15 strapped across the front of them, you know, uh, that doesn't, that gun's not going to go off unless that person for some reason didn't have the safety on. But the gun in itself is not going to hurt you. You watch the behavior of the people, not the guns. Don't pay attention to the guns. Pay attention to the behavior of the people. You have a great day. Stay safe. Get out and vote. The best way to vote, do it absentee. Take it down to the clerk's office and turn it in. Go get it, fill it out, take it back. That is your safest bet for voting today, where you don't have all these hassles to worry about. So don't put yourself in a poor position in that light. Okay? You have a great day, and stay safe. Please wear your mask. That's another thing that's part of protection. There's a lot of things part of protection besides guns. There's weather, there's health issues. There's a lot of things you learn in that book about traveling that you need to think about before you go overseas in particular. Okay? You have a great day. Thanks for watching. I hope you stay safe during this period of time.